Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar on navigating IT landscape, roadmaps, and IT budget. Today's webinar is presented by ISOutsource, and we have three panelists joining us today from our office. We have Doug Costa, our vCIO, Matt Gilbertson, our principal consultant, and Scott Roberts, our senior director of engineering. I'm going to hand over the floor over to these guys who are going to enlighten us today about the importance of IT roadmaps and budgeting. Take it away, you guys.
Hi, I'm Matt Gilbertson with ISOutsource. I'm a principal consultant, been with ISO for a little over 5 years and in the IT industry for a little over 25.
Hi, I'm Scott Roberts, Senior Director of Engineering here at ISOutsource. I've been with our company for 11 years and I've been in IT for 20.
And I'm Doug Costa. I'm completing my third year at ISOutsource and my 15th in IT management and leadership. And as we get started today, I'd like to bring a question up on the screen and encourage everyone to participate in a poll. We'd like to know how many of you have had trouble defining your IT roadmap and budget. And as you answer this, I'd like to know what are some of the variables and unknowns that you might have missed while attempting to plan an IT budget and roadmap. See some answers coming in. And it's not uncommon. We see the yes, the sometimes. This is a challenging but very important part of IT governance. And the real importance is in aligning IT investments with overall business goals. Planning for IT investments must always begin with an understanding of your business's objectives. You need to understand your business and operational goals, your security requirements and priorities, as well as your governance, risk, and compliance environment. The key to that is to develop a roadmap that aligns those business goals with IT solutions. I'm pulling up a slide that shows an example of an IT roadmap, and you can see how all of the IT initiatives are laid out in a sequential manner, and every IT investment should be tied to a specific business goal. So as we think about the alignment between IT investments and business goals, Matt, could you tell us some of the examples we talked about how IT can drive business growth and efficiency?
Absolutely. Thanks, Doug. You know, for areas of efficiencies, we can look at automating manual processes, leverage Power Automate, PowerShell itself, and other scripting languages within the environment. We can look for efficiencies within the hardware itself, have high availability pairs for firewalls, allowing that failover to occur if you have a hardware failure to ensure everyone stays connected and their connectivity is not interrupted. We can look at server clusters. You know, 2 is 1, 1 is none. It's an N+1 configuration. Proper disk configurations in arrays to ensure that you've got hot spares, eliminating these single points of failure. Another item that we want to do is minimize the attack surface. That also allows you to improve productivity. Leverage AI. You know, Copilot is a great component now that plugs into the entire Microsoft suite of applications. We can leverage business intelligence, Power BI, diving into data warehouses and data lakes. There's a lot of tools available now for fostering collaboration like Teams and Slack. Increasing your security posture is always a component to efficiency, but it also is an interesting concept and point is it can also create some issues. And, Scott's got a great slide that we were talking about last week that kind of discusses some of those components of security and usability. Scott, you want to pull that slide up?
Yeah, sure. So this is one of my favorite conversations to have with clients. Most clients think you can just throw money at security and it just works. However, it's very much a sliding scale of security versus usability. You really have to be thoughtful in the areas you invest because potentially you're breaking down critical business processes within your organization. Some of the productivity blockers can be there's just too many layers of security, like MFA authentication. Everybody, when you go to a bank now, they enforce two-factor authentication, but a lot of organizations aren't doing that yet. They may have to train up their users on how to do MFA, using their personal cell phones for MFA, issue them phones or MFA tokens. Just more complex for just logging into systems, which makes the process just longer and more difficult for your teams to do their jobs. Overall, just training users on these technologies as well is very difficult. You have to be really thoughtful about the different complex interfaces you're putting in front of your team. Also, team member pushback. A lot of team members may not see the value in the security layers we're adding, and it's just an uphill battle with training those users. Also, strict access controls. Role-based access control is fantastic. It minimizes the things your team can access to only what they need to work on. However, if you need them to work outside the box, they may not have access to do so, and you have to put extra steps in place to get them the access they need to do the added roles you're putting on top of them. Also, network segmentation. It's great to minimize your attack surface by segmenting your network so only certain pieces of your network can talk to other pieces. However, if a user needs more access to do their job, it's going to be more difficult to give them that access. And finally, just compliance overload. Just the added overhead to any operational needs you have due to compliance. This can cause just really cumbersome workflows that just make it a lot more difficult for your team to do their jobs.
I think it's really important to have that honest conversation about the challenges of implementing really robust security, but all of us would also agree that it's a really important thing to do. In some ways, the most important thing that a business can do is protect its data and the data of its customers. So, Matt, I'm curious how we can resolve those challenges, beginning by assessing and understanding an IT environment.
Yeah, Doug, right, there's multiple reasons for doing those assessments and approaches to doing them. We look at things from a multitude of reasons and perspectives. Is there a need for certain compliance, like was just discussed? Is it a HIPAA environment, SOC 1 or SOC 2 compliant environment? What do we need to look at? We need to perform a complete gap analysis and understand, what consists in that environment. Is there any end of life, end of support hardware? We want to look at processes and workflows. What are those line of business applications doing? What does the complete security posture look like? Do a complete audit as well of not only on-prem, but software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service to see how your cloud integrates in with the rest of your environment. And is it secure and up to standard with the rest of the environment and the plans that you're doing? And also looking into future needs. We've got quite a few tools that we use to help us with these assessments. I can kind of turn that, Scott, as the director of engineering, you're the perfect person to talk about the tools that we use. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, sure. So here at ISOutsource, we leverage a multitude of tools to really thoroughly assess an environment. A main one is Aavik. Aavik tells us exactly what's plugged into your environment, and you can't truly assess it unless you know everything that's out there. So that tool really helps us do that. We're also starting to leverage LionGuard. LionGuard helps, once you have a full picture of everything that's in your environment, LionGuard helps you understand how they're all configured and working together. And that can ingest all that information. Also, we leverage N-Central for our RMM solution, and that's really take into account just inventory and performance management of all your systems and overall health. And the last thing we do is just simply interviewing staff. Like, nobody understands these environments more than your teams that are working day to day. So we really take time to be methodical in interviewing staff and really understanding their workflows, their processes, their challenges with applications and infrastructure. And we all take that into account. And with all that information, it really gives us a bird's eye view into the IT environment itself. Doug, how do you leverage this information? We gather a lot of it. Like, how do you use it?
Yeah, so with all of that information, we take the next step, which is applying it and defining an IT vision. A clear and compelling IT vision aligns with overall business strategy and mitigates risk. And when we think of risk, there are really three types that I like to think of. Technical risk, meaning risk to the systems themselves and their performance. Operational risk, meaning how do those systems or a breakdown in those systems affect your ability to do business. And finally, reputational risk, meaning what happens in the marketplace and in the minds of your customers and prospective customers if there is a failure of your systems. So to really understand that, you need to think about how your company does business and how your customers do business. What are your operational needs? Are you in office or do you work remotely? What are your key line of business applications and how do you access them and what data is stored in them? And finally, maybe most importantly, what expectations do your clients have about the way that you are going to conduct business, your accessibility, and their ability to interface with your systems and their data as it resides on those systems? From there, we want to think about security needs. Primarily, we want to start by thinking about your overall governance, risk, and compliance context. Are you in a regulated industry? Are you subject to specific compliance requirements? As Matt mentioned, there's HIPAA, there's SOC 1, SOC 2, etc. What are your requirements to maintain cyber insurance? I think now cyber insurance is increasingly important as a way to provide coverage to help mitigate recovery from breaches or damage caused to technical systems. And you really need to know what you're attesting to with your cyber insurance providers, because those are contracts indicating that you have appropriate technical controls in place to help prevent those incidents from occurring. And then finally, one of the things we see is one of the fastest growing areas for our clients is business to business, third party, and client requirements. What that really looks like is your clients will often now have requirements about the systems and controls that you have in place in order for you to do business with them as a way of protecting them and their data. So again, from that engineering perspective, Scott, we want to move from developing a technology roadmap to specific IT initiatives. What does that process look like?
Yeah, so to identify key IT initiatives, first you really need to understand the overall business strategy. Sorry. You really got to ask yourself, what is the company's primary goal? What are we focused on? What are we looking to optimize? And understanding these strategic objectives clarifies where technology investments yield the most significant returns. You also need to identify the pain points in the environment. Again, interviewing people, you really get to understand those pain points, and you can really layer that into what the key IT initiatives are. Also, you got to assess the impact on overall business value. Are you looking to drive revenue growth? Are you looking to reduce costs or overhead? Or are you simply just trying to reduce risk? Like, those can all layer in and really shape those IT initiatives. It also enables you to just make more informed decision making. Once you've kind of defined those initiatives, this kind of preps your executives and gives them the insight they need to help you prioritize and invest in the right projects and really prioritize those initiatives. So Doug, with that kind of clarity on IT initiatives, like, how would you create a phased roadmap with that?
Yeah, the goal is to break down those initiatives and to break down the IT roadmap into manageable phases, considering factors such as budget, resources, and dependencies, meaning what needs to happen for other elements of the roadmap to happen. Again, we keep using some of these same words. The way to prioritize IT projects is fundamentally related to business value, risk, and alignment with strategic goals. So you want to prioritize projects based on alignment with those goals, manage and mitigate risk in the environment so that you understand where that risk is. You need to know what risks you're willing to accept and what risks must be mitigated in order for you to do business most effectively, efficiently, and safely. And finally, think in terms about how you measure achievement of your strategic goals and how you measure the alignment of those goals with your overall business goals. One of the ways is return on investment. How much does an IT investment increase revenue or decrease expenses for you? And then what's the payback period for these investments? Meaning, how long does it take for those benefits to be realized? So we think about all of these factors when we're prioritizing IT initiatives. And then we start moving into some of the specifics as we move from this kind of holistic thinking into the specific primary categories we consider when developing an IT roadmap. And so we're going to pull up the last slide now with some of those categories.
Yeah, so when planning your IT budget, it's essential to think holistically and allocating those into the proper buckets. And the first is hardware, and that's all things server infrastructure, networking infrastructure, desktops, laptops. You really got to have a line item for those in your budget. You got to think about software. You got to think about licensing, number of headcount, number of required licenses, the different software licensing models, and then layering that into your budget. Staffing. You really got to think about how many personnel you need to execute year in and year out. You absolutely need to be taking that into consideration, especially if you're a growing organization or you're a shrinking organization. Overall, just services. The more we put stuff into the cloud, you got to be really cognizant of those subscription costs and the scaling of those subscription costs, because a lot of these are based off of overall usage, either storage or compute. And those can really change over time, and you need to take that into consideration when budgeting. Just overall prioritization, just thinking about ROI on projects and which ones are going to have the most bang for your buck. So really making sure they're layered in as well. And some flexibility. You got to think about the unknowns that are happening, especially in the IT landscape and the security landscape. You don't know what you don't know, so you need to take that into account in your budget as well. And then finally, balance and track. Just make sure you have a balanced budget. I know it can be difficult at times. Just be really thoughtful about where you're allocating that money, and just set proper KPIs and monitor and audit it regularly to ensure that you're tracking appropriately, and be prepared to rebalance if necessary. Matt, any idea on how you can also help optimize these IT costs?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, we just covered a lot there. When we look at how do we optimize IT costs, and we frequently hear the cloud as an option in cloud first strategies. We want to look at, what does the workload say? What does the workload tell us? What's the IO profile? Is it latency? Does latency negatively affect it? And determining how best to optimize those compute workloads. On-prem or cloud, both are options. Do you want to look at leasing versus a capital expenditure that you have to depreciate over a period of time versus lease and quick refreshes every 3 to 4 years? Looking at end of life, end of support hardware we kind of talked about earlier. Having a complete functioning asset management application in your environment to really tell us what all exists in that environment. What is the age of it? Is it under warranty? Another big component is invest in employee training. Their training will give them the ability to maintain those environments and take you further. Another component that I always look into is looking into and leveraging, solutions that integrate directly into your business continuity and disaster recovery planning. So if an application that is cloud-based has replication from the West region to the East region, you've got some built-in redundancy and ability to continue operating in the event of an outage or an issue. Leverage data analytics. And what does your data tell you? What does the data you have currently tell you for trends and patterns? And again, I think this is a pretty common IT challenge for a lot of teams. And, Scott, I bet you see a lot of this. And why don't you tell us a little bit about how you address a lot of these common challenges?
Yeah, I think it's security, security, security. And it's a continual challenge for all organizations. A couple tips or things to consider when budgeting. These 4 things I'm about to mention I deem critical for all organizations, and you should really consider for your budget. And first is investing in incident response. It's not a matter of if you get compromised, it's a matter of when you get compromised, unfortunately. So really take the time and think about how you can invest in having a proper incident response plan to ensure that you detect it immediately, you can contain it immediately, and you can recover and be back to normal business operation. Also investing in vulnerability management. That's just ensuring that every single little hole in your environment is plugged and that it's way more difficult for an attacker to get into your environment. Also investing in an advanced threat protection program. And this, I think a standard antivirus solution is just not adequate anymore. You really need to consider investing more into endpoint protection that can do more things in recognizing just unnatural behaviors in your environment and locking down an endpoint if it deems something suspect. The newer technology was completely turn off a machine from your environment if it sees something unusual. And lastly is multi-factor authentication. If you're not doing that across the majority of your systems already, I would absolutely take the time and invest in multi-factor authentication. It makes it that much more difficult for an attacker to get into your environment. Doug, what are some of the challenges that your clients deal with?
Honestly, I think one of the biggest challenges is thinking through how to manage and allocate resources, both capital and human, to all of the technical, security, and operational priorities that we've discussed, and aligning resources with those initiatives. So one of the things that a company like ISOutsource does is align our resources with our clients' key projects and initiatives. Really what we're looking to do is build a strong IT team. And a lot of time what that looks like is stepping in and either augmenting the existing IT team at a client, if they don't have one, stepping in and providing services to target those critical areas. The key is really having.
I think we may have lost Doug. Matt,
Sounds
do you
like
want to
we
talk
up.
about emerging technologies while we wait for Doug to reconnect?
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. And Doug was, what he was talking about is really, how our teams can work well together and collaborate with each other. And, here at IS Outsources, we have a huge team, 75 plus engineers currently that will work great as augmenting your existing team's capabilities. And with that said, right, Scott, thank you for bringing up emerging technologies. That's always something we kind of want to look into. There are a lot of components being developed now. Software is at a rapid development pace with AI, and a lot of new applications are coming out that can improve things and simplify processes for you. We want to look at how to adopt new technologies. You can work with manufacturers directly to set up proof of concepts. Look at other people in your vertical and what are they doing to improve that infrastructure. The three-tier infrastructure is something we used to talk about years ago, but now really things have moved to a hyper-converged infrastructure, integrated management. We have stacks that integrate directly with Azure for push-button failover for business continuity and disaster recovery, NVMe compliant protocol devices that improve speeds and throughput drastically. And really looking at how do we prioritize these projects and initiatives, and what can we solve with technology from a hardware cost, or what can we solve with software. There's a lot of different options that we can talk about there, and a lot of different methodologies and new products coming out on a pretty consistent basis that we try to stay up to date with.
And Matt, I think that's one of our strengths as a company, is that our clients don't have to build a team of specialists in-house. They can leverage our fractional services to align competencies with that knowledge and with that expertise and with their specific needs. Like you mentioned, our teams work well together and collaborate with other IS outsource resources and with internal IT teams at our clients to step in and drive that innovation and change in those emerging technologies. So I think that's really one of the unique ways that we're able to partner with our clients and ensure that they have access to the technical knowledge and skills that they need to make these initiatives a reality.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Scott. Cads, I think we're ready for questions.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Doug, Scott, and Matt, for this wonderful conversation. We do have a few questions that have been submitted by the audience. As a reminder, you still have time, and you can drop in your questions if you haven't submitted them as yet, and we will try to get through as many as time allows. So, Matt, the first question comes for you from David Lee. He wants to know, can you explain the long-term value of an IT roadmap?
Absolutely. That's a great question, David. When we talk about IT roadmaps, it really helps us plan and forecast what is on the horizon, not only just what's happening this year, next year, but all the way up through 5 years, so that we can have a full understanding of where those hardware life cycles and depreciation cycles line up, where the need for equipment refresh is, what those costs will be. It'll allow our executive teams to properly budget and plan for those changes, for those upgrades, and that's always with an eye on those emerging technologies, to know that, if we stay status quo and look at either 3-tier or hyper-converged, it will cost us theoretically X at this point in time. or with emerging technologies, we could potentially leverage some new solutions that are coming down to combine multiple products. But at least it gives that high level plan and picture for the executive team for budgeting purposes and understanding what that strategy is to get your organization over that next hurdle to be more productive and create greater revenue.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, we have another question from Joe, who wants to know what percentage of your gross revenue do you allocate to an IT budget as a rule of thumb? Scott, do you think you can answer that for us?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. I think it's a big depends on your business, the industry you're in, your company's reliance on technology. So I'm sorry, but I don't think there's a rule of thumb for this. You really got to think about it holistically and understand where you're allocating that money.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
there really is no silver bullet in IT.
Yeah.
All right. We'll take the next one. Doug, Christy Swanson wants to know, how do you begin to allocate a budget towards an IT roadmap?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it really speaks to what Scott and Matt were just talking about. You really do need to begin, as we've said many times throughout this conversation today, by defining your business priorities and understanding your budget availability in the way that IT supports your overall business goals. So from there, you develop solutions that meet those needs, both on the technical, operational, and business sides, while remaining fiscally responsible. And then when it comes time to prioritize, you allocate budget to items that have the highest business value to your organization. As we talked about earlier, you can measure that in terms of return on investment. Some of the ways you do that are by thinking, how much new revenue will this additional process or tooling help you to generate? Or on the other side of that equation, how much expense can it save you in your business operations? And you'll want to measure that by things like time to value or payback period, which are ways of measuring how long it will be before those benefits are realized on your balance sheet.
Brilliant. Thank you for answering that, Doug. All right, we're going to take the last question for today. Scott, I'm going to let you answer this. Max Miller wants to know, how do you stay updated on emerging technology and trends, and how do you evaluate their potential benefits for clients?
Yeah, so we're pretty lucky here at ISOutsource because we have such a large team of IT professionals working for us. With that, we get their varied backgrounds and their varied perspectives on how IT should function within a business. So we 100% leverage that, and we try to position our engineers with clients that it makes the most sense with their given background. We also rely a lot on certification. A lot of the big vendors it's a teaching in terms of like technical skill set, but it also teaches you where the technology is going itself. So we put a lot of different certification goals on our engineers, and that also just kind of raises our experience level across the board. The other things you can do, and that I do personally, is I really keep track of a lot of the different vendor blogs because they have a lot of marketing on the future of where their technology is going. So staying up to speed on that, and I have a whole lot of team members that are doing the same thing. But it's technology, it's IT, it's nonstop. It's a fire hose, and you just try and take as many gulps as you can because it's not stopping.
Always evolving.
All right. Well, that concludes our questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thanks to Doug, Scott, and Matt for providing your valuable insights and expertise. If you have any additional questions or would like to connect directly with ISOutsource, you can reach out to us on our website or the information that you can see on the slide right now, as well as on our social media channels. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.